Today we're going to be installing this VADpro VAD28 Gen 2 device powered by CANchecked into my B9 Audi S4. Our friends at VADpro and CANchecked were kind enough to send me this device and help me get it configured and set up, and it provides real-time data logging metrics that you can view so you can see, your boost, knock, all those other features. You're able to tie in digital sensors, analog sensors. In my case, and what I'll show you today, is tying in a GM/Continental ethanol flex fuel sensor. This device also provides alerting and correlation of different sensors for alerting and a ton of very advanced features. Now this video is going to be broken up into two parts. The first part is going to be covering installation of the device, the wiring, and how to get a basic configuration just to get you started. But then there is going to be a part two. So if you want to find out more about advanced features such as the data logging, the alerting, how to correlate sensors in your alerting, you definitely want to hit the subscribe button to catch that part too. So we're in the car and we can start to work to remove this vent so that we can install our VADpro device. Step one is to remove this panel right here. There we go. Panel's removed. We'll need an 8mm socket, and we're going for this little guy right here. If you open up the glove compartment, you're gonna have two bolts up here. They're also 8mm, and we can pop those out. There's one more right down here, and one more right out here. We've got to rip this thing down. We need to remove this piece of carbon trim here. The T20 is like right there. You can use a pick to remove this connector. Pull up and out. There are two 8mm bolts. They're quite easy to see and get to. And you might have to scoot your steering wheel forward if you have it too close to the dash. We've got to remove this piece, but this trim here is going to get in the way, so we have to be really careful prying it away. And I am not the interior guy, that's for sure. Yeah, see what I mean about these things being connected? There we go. You'll need to push this piece in and pull this piece out a little bit. So there we go. We should be able to pull this out now. I think there's another wire. Basically, I was able to kind of plunge the pick and push this way. So we've got our vent and we're on the workbench, and I'm gonna set it down on this nice clean new terry so I don't scratch it up. And you wanna have a few different tools that you can play with. I got these from like a phone repair kit, but basically they're little pry bars and little picks that are plastic so I don't scratch up and break things. First thing we need to do is remove this cable right here. And we're gonna do that by first pulling out this side and then unwrapping it around a little and pulling out right here. So there we go, it's free now. Then we have these clips, and these need to be pulled away. And then the same deal here, you have to pull this one away, but this one here, you have to push down, basically imagining that little piece, that little cutout pulling out into here. That'll kind of release things. Then on the other side, just use your fingers to keep pressure on the vent, and that'll help it pop out. This one I'm able to, I think, do with just my fingers. Yep. Both sides, ooh, both sides popped out, good. We wanna get this side out, and I think this is where our pick's gonna come in. There we go, we've unhooked it. Are all my sides free? That they are. Fit the display into our fixture here. Yep, there we go. Now this USB port does just go out to a lead and needs to be plugged into the microcontroller's USB port. I'm assuming all of you guys know how to plug in a USB. Before we continue, I need 1 second of your time. You'll find that there's a link to this VADpro device down below in the description. Now, it's an affiliate link, and if you're interested in this device, you're thinking about buying it, and you like my video, I'd really appreciate it if you bought it through my link, because those commissions will help support this channel and make future content. I won't hold you any longer. Let's get back to the install. Let's get started on the electrical side of our fuel sensor connection, and I'll link you guys to where you can purchase this connector that's already been pinned and ready specifically for ethanol sensors. Our VADpro device is going to be able to provide us the ground, the power, and take our signal directly, so we don't need a separate source for all this. To avoid a floating state on our pin, the one that's going to receive the signal, we need to install a pull-up resistor between the 5-volt wire and the sensor wire. We're going to need a 1K resistor. And the resistor, it doesn't really matter the polarity or anything like that. Start somewhere around here on the wire. We're gonna pull the resistor out. So we're just kind of looping the one end of the resistor around the wire, and we'll add a little solder to it as well, just to kind of hold it in place. And I'm not the best at this. I'm gonna just use some pliers to kind of smush that sharp edge so that it doesn't poke through the insulation we're gonna add. So again, you're basically just wrapping that little end around. Hopefully you guys can see what I'm doing. Smush it a little with my pliers. Now we can add a little bit of solder to this. I'm sure you guys are gonna cringe at my incredible soldering skills. Somewhere my electronics teacher from high school is laughing at me. Take this heat shrink tubing and we're gonna aim for right about there. So we can get that a cut, run that all the way down, and get that over our resistor as far down as that'll go. Now we're gonna take this larger piece of heat shrink tubing and cut it down to size, right about there. Make sure we're not exposing the conductor. Obviously this harness that we made is gonna be a little short to reach inside the cabin of the car because it does have to connect to the back of the unit here via the pinout, but I do have this extra cable here that I think will do the trick. This cable actually carries 6 conductors and they have matching colors, so we got red, white, and black. And then you get 3 more for future sensors, other things you may want to bring into the car. Before we start splicing our wires, let's get some heat shrink tubing going. If you don't have heat shrink tubing, electrical tape can work. It just gets kind of gross over time. We're ready to start splicing, and I'll show you guys how I've learned to do it in the past. I think this is called the lineman splice, but basically you make kind of an X and then you start going around. So you just keep wrapping the cable until it is snug and both sides are tight. Pull the heat shrink over the cable. Might get a little snug if you put too much solder on like I did, and we'll heat shrink these in a second. Now go ahead and do the other 3 cables. And you don't want to go so hot that you melt insulation or anything like that. Ready to start the installation under the hood. So the sensor's here, that's what we're tying into. And I've already had this installed. There's a separate video that I've done that I'll link up in your corner if you want to see how I did this, and I was using a different device to read it. There's a grommet right there that seems to go right where we need to go. This thing, I believe, kind of just pops up. It's a little bit of a forward and up. Now keep in mind your windshield wiper is over there. So I don't think this whole thing can come out without removing the windshield wiper. It sure seems like there's room in this grommet for me to stick another cable through. Now we can plug in our sensor. It's locked in. And let's get that little shielding over here and basically start at one end and get it wrapped around and then just keep zipping it in there. There we go. I think that's a pretty reasonable install. All right, now we got to tuck the cable in here. Run around the brake fluid canister. Now there's a grommet down there, and I'll show it to you in a photo because there's no way I can get my camera in there to show you, but you're gonna need like a somewhat sharp, like a coat hanger or similar tool to poke through it. So here's what I came up with. This is the tool we were using earlier, and I'm gonna attach the cable to it with electrical tape, start getting them together. And it's a good idea to kind of wrap around the front here so that it becomes less of a, like an uneven surface, so it makes it easier to pull through. Basically, kind of the inner ring part is the mushy soft part. Stab around that, but don't stab the wiring, obviously. I was able to pull the cable through the firewall and fish it out on this side. And I'll show you a photo of how it came out, kind of a view through here. You may need to reach your hand under the steering wheel. There's a brush guard in there. Essentially, you can nudge this wire up on top of our little shelving unit that we get down here for the manual. Just nudge it up so that it hops over it and then keep pushing and it'll come out right here. Now, the other thing that I need to do is trim off this area here because the device won't fit otherwise. I've just been using little snips and I stuck a rag in here so that stuff doesn't go flying inside the dashboard. Snip along the line and then we'll sand it down a little bit. I already started on the one side, so. Hopefully this is enough. You can probably use a cutting disc or all kinds of other tools like with a Dremel, but I think you'll make a lot more dust. It does fit now. I did have to trim kind of that whole bottom lip. So it needs to be kind of flat and then the screen just goes right in. Pull it back out because we do have some pinning and cabling to do. Cut this thing. Cut this little string off, we don't need it out here. And we're gonna be installing pin terminals on these. So we do need to strip these, but it's a pretty short amount, like even that might be too much. So connectors will usually come in a bag or a little strip like this. And you can basically remove them from the strip by bending them around. Now the wire's gonna be going inside of this part of the connector, so that's why it needs to be pretty shallow. These connectors have like a little U. A lot of people will think that you put the U, the bottom of the U, in the bottom of the U on the crimper, but it's the other way around. The U's face away from each other. And basically you just squeeze a little bit, very carefully. It's kind of hard to do while I'm filming it, but you just work that into the hole there. And you want to get your white wire in there, so you very carefully feed it in all the way, and then you squeeze hard. And you should see the crimp kind of get stuck in there, and there we go. That should be a permanent connection. Continue running all the cabling cleanly in here first. Once they come out here, out of this hole, then I'll show you how to pin these together. So let's do it. Okay, so we got the cables through here. When you plug the cable in, it's good to kind of pop it behind this cover here. And it's because it'll point away from the airbag. I just don't want to have anybody install this where there's a chance the airbag is going to snag the cable. So now it's time to do the pinning on our connector. And you definitely want to look at the big connector that has the green and yellow wire. That's your CAN high, CAN low, and they're in the 2 and 3 spot on the connector. So you want to look with that little retaining pin down, plug in the red wire into spot number 8, the black wire into spot number 9, and the white signal wire into spot number 10. The way these connectors work is there are these little hooks. And those little hooks, they need to be parallel. They need to go this way, left to right. Start with the VCC red, and that's going to go into the 8th hole. And you see I've got those little prongs side to side. It pinned in real nicely. Give it a little tug, and we're gonna align the black one and get that in there evenly for pin number 9. That's what it should look like when you're done. Now this can be kind of bent back or whatever you want to do with it. And this device supports multiple signal sources, so maybe there's some analog sensors we want to add in the future. Let's do a little startup test. We take our screen and we take our connectors, and the big connector obviously goes in the big slot. Let's turn the ignition on. Hey, VADpro logo, we're doing good. And there we go, our ethanol signal's working too. We can see we've got some other screens here that are getting things off the CAN bus. We do need to curl these wires up and put them on top of the box here. So I'm gonna unplug them temporarily. We wanna have about this much wire out here. I'm gonna use a piece of Velcro, but you could use like a zip tie or whatever you really want. And then we just need to get this stuff in there to send in. We can start the reassembly process now. Get our little connections going. Get the little zip tie. Slide this kind of behind here. That way you don't have to create a crazy bend radius on it by zip tying it. Make sure we still have signal. Pop this little guy back in. We've got our 8mm bolts that we need to put in. And remember, there's not a lot of torque here. Our carbon fiber piece, and remember to plug it back in. I think we just push. Turn it on again, make sure the buttons work, and they do. There's a little T20 in here. This big guy here. Some screws up here. These might be a little annoying because you might find that the box has shifted a little. Two down there that we took out before. I've got the CANchecked software loaded up, and this is what will let us configure the device. There's a couple of things we need to do on the device first. So you want to go into setup with the ignition on and make sure that you could see in this CAN bus menu that it says CAN OK. That means you have a good connection to the OBD2 to your CAN bus and you're getting data from the car. The first thing we need to do is make sure the TRI and TRX file is selected. Now this CWG code is correct for my car, so I'm good with that. But you can click scan motor code, or if you know the correct code, go through here and pick the right file and then click load. So once you've loaded it, that's how it'll know what sensors are available to your engine code. But let's see what else is in here. So let's go to DTC, which is our scanning, and we can click scan fault codes. So it'll start to scan. Looks like I don't have any at the moment, so we can exit that screen. Now by pulling the screen up, you can play with the brightness, and it has the log button, which starts our logging. So if we click that, there we go, we're logging now. And you can navigate between different screens by swiping. And if you want to edit one of the pages, you can by tapping it, and that kind of lets you make changes to it. If you don't want to accidentally make changes, what you can do is go back to setup, and you can look at your pages button here, which lets you lock and unlock or enable pages. The widget packs will reset all the pages to one of the predefined widgets. You don't really need to do that right now. One thing you can do too is you can change the start page by tapping on it. And then I like kind of last used or page one, probably leave it at page one. One other thing that might be important is if you go to the pages area and scroll all the way down, there's this orientation feature. You definitely want it to be horizontal because otherwise the display will be flipped. If yours is flipped or something, just edit that in the menu. Let's plug it in and see what the software itself can do. Plug the device in. The laptop's now powering the device. Click start in the middle there, and then you want to pick the MFD28 Gen 2 device. Then click connection. Then you should see COM4 as your serial console port. You want to untick import all pages. We don't need that. And just click import now. Let me tell you about the different screens. The TRI editor is your list of sensors. So the best way to describe this is everything the device is currently set up to monitor. To explain where this TRI file comes from is it was imported originally from the display. And I mean, we can click it again and it'll import what the display has. The other page is called pages. And what this does, and we can say import from display, and those are the different pages that we have on the display. So obviously we have this page, there it is. One really cool thing I could show you right off the bat is this animate button. If you tap that on, check out what's happening. The display is running through its paces. So it's showing you what it can do. It's showing you like the torque maxing out, the oil pressure. It's giving you an intake temperature warning. It's just as a demo. And then these are all your widgets. So those are the different sensors. These are what we call pre-built pages. So if you click this little link down that says load predefined pages, you have a ton of these to pick from that you can essentially use to learn to build your own or just use them as it is. You have up to 10 pages to work with. We have page 1. Over here we have page 2, which gives us our current gear position. Animate that and show you guys a little demo. So there we go, there's the animation. And then we have a performance monitor page, and this gives you some basic performance data. Now it's not GPS corrected. The log viewer is where you're gonna be able to import logs from the display and then review them on the screen. And we'll play with that in our part 2 video. So for now, we're not gonna really cover this. And then we have just general settings in here that you can go through, including your input pins, and we'll talk about that when we set up our E85 flex fuel sensor. You can also upload files to the display if you want to bring in images. Let's say you have your own logo that you might want to use, so that's definitely possible. Let's learn how to actually edit something. Now, a good first place for us to start would be with our ethanol sensor. The first thing we need to do is enable enhanced mode. We'll need to create a custom sensor, so we're going to click the custom button, and boom, we've got this thing down here. So we can click details. The first thing we want to do is edit our CAN ID, and this should be 0FFF. You don't have to worry for now about exactly what that means, but if you hover over these question marks, there is like a little help tooltip that'll tell you what it does. Now for the format, we want to keep that at 0, and then the start byte, we want to make that 11. Length is our attenuation. It's essentially the dampening of the signal. And for our ethanol sensor, we want to probably put in 249. I've been having good luck with that. Essentially, it'll just reduce the amount of bounciness in the sensor output as it reads the frequency of the sensor. We do want to use unsigned. Unsigned just means that the value can't be negative. For the CAN mask, we want to put in 0. For decimal places, we want to put in 0. We don't really need decimal places. And then for the name, let's call it ethanol. Hard to type in this position. For the init offset, we want to do -50, and I believe this has to do with the fact that our sensor is 50 to 150 hertz. So we want to back the 50 out of it. I believe that's how this is working. Mapper we can leave alone, and active we can leave alone. For the min value, we're going to just go with 0. And for the max value, we're going to say 100. We're going to hit apply, click the export to display button right up here. Before we create a widget with our ethanol content, we want to go to this other settings page, edit this IO pin section. You want to make sure that you've saved B10 5 volt under the frequency in. B10 is that pin, if you remember. And here's that nice little diagram. There's B10 that we plugged in the white sensor cable into. So you definitely want to make sure that's in here. And then you want to click right to display. Go to pages. We want to import them from the display. Maybe I don't really care about torque. So let's delete that, delete that, delete that. Let's say we want to place our ethanol content right up here. So we're going to click add widget. We're going to pick this widget and drag it over. Go down here to where it says vertical bar. Let's call it sensor value. And let's reposition it. So there we go. There's our sensor value. And I don't want to have it be turbo speed. I want to go all the way down to the bottom and pick ethanol percentage. And then we can adjust some colors. Right now, we're not doing any warning colors because our min and max are maxed out. But you can adjust your font color, your background color, your frame color. You can adjust the font size. Basically, all this neat stuff can be adjusted in here. I don't really care about showing the max value, so I'm going to untick show max. I do want to see the name. I don't care about warnings for min and max right now. And that's basically it. So there's our widget. Quite easy, right, guys? So let's export this to the display. Take a look at that. There's our ethanol value hanging steady at 76. One thing you may want to do is save all this stuff to file. So here are all your sensor values. You can see them in kind of this text format, and you probably want to download the TRI file. So why don't we create a new folder, call it VADpro. Let's save our TRI file in here, back it up so we don't have to redo this if we accidentally overwrite it in our display. Go to our pages editor, And we also want to save that to file. So there we go, widget.txt, let's save that. Then our settings, same deal, save to file, and save them to your VADpro folder. And that's it, guys. You've created a sensor, you've made a widget, you've deleted widgets, you've seen some basic editing and pages in here, and you backed up all your configuration to your computer. So let's disconnect, unplug, power on our VADpro device with the ignition of the car. And there we go, everything's still working. There's our ethanol sensor reading. It does tend to jump to a little bit of a higher value and come back down with the dampening up so high, but you kind of want the dampening higher. Otherwise, you'll have an unsteady signal where it'll be bouncing a little and it'll be reading, you know, a little higher, a little lower, a little higher, a little lower. You just kind of want it to give you a pretty steady signal. Now that we've got that device installed, I want to take a couple of minutes to talk about the installation, things that you need to watch out for, and kind of my first impressions of the device. The installation itself, I thought, is pretty easy. If you're just installing the VADpro device, I would definitely give it a 1 out of 5 wrench. Virtually anyone would be able to do this if they're remotely handy. A couple of areas to watch out for the device installation itself are going to be pulling off the vent trim because it has the rest of the trim kind of stuck to it on the right side near the steering wheel. You definitely want to be careful there. The vent really is held on by 2 clips. So if you pull those up, you can then push on the other side of the vent and kind of pry away at the other piece of trim on top of it. They'll separate. And then the other piece is going to be trimming off some of the plastic behind that vent so the VADpro device can fit. Just shove a rag in there and make sure things don't go flying down into your dashboard. You don't want that. Just vacuum clean up after it. Now, if you are installing the flex fuel sensor, things do get a little more difficult. The flex fuel sensor does require changes to some of your fuel hoses. And also, when you go through the firewall, there's the gotcha of having to poke through it, through the little grommet there, and definitely not into the bundle of wires. So you want to be really careful. That bundle is kind of rubberized in that piece, and it's like a straight line, and you want to go parallel with it. You don't want to poke into that line and sever any of the cabling. That would be really bad. There's some pinning and some soldering. Don't learn from me on that part. If you want to learn how to solder, tons of better videos out there. I'm using like a Radio Shack soldering gun from like 1998 or something. The device itself, I think, is just so cool. The amount of configurability that's in there. It can seem a little daunting when you first open the application. You're like, oh wow, there's a lot of stuff I can do in here. But really, it's pretty simple. Hopefully I explained the page as well. I'm very happy with the fit and finish. I love having the USB port right in the front so I can get data off of it when I've done my data logging, I've driven around, done all that great stuff. And I think that aesthetically, it really does kind of blend with the car. It doesn't just immediately go like, oh wow, somebody super glued something in here. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and learned about a really cool product. And I hope you're gonna stick around for part 2. So remember to hit that subscribe button, give me a like, leave me a nice comment. I love talking to all you guys, and I definitely want to hear what you want to learn about with this device. So if you have questions about it, things you want me to cover in part 2, let me know, and I'll see you again real soon.